Okay, we're going to practice solving one-step equations that have rational coefficients. So we're going to review our steps. So this is a shortened version of what you've seen before, so definitely get that down. First step is to simplify each side. Second step, remember your goal. We want to isolate the variable. Remember, the word isolate just means get by itself. Okay. Undo the addition, and then finally, finally undo the multiplication. All right, let's review some examples. So when we were solving for x, we're going to be focusing on the multiplication equations. So just a few reminders. Of course, first, simplify the equation. There's nothing to simplify. Next, we need to remember that our main goal is to have x equals some number. Okay. When we have a multiplication equation, the way to get x isolated is to take that coefficient and make it become 1. If the coefficient's a 1, then our equation is simplified. So I need this 5 to become a 1. So to make this 5 become a 1, because I'm multiplying, I undo the multiplication. If I look at 5, my coefficient, as 5 over 1, I find the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 5 over 1 is 1 over 5. So I multiply each side by 1 over 5. My 5's cancel on the left-hand side, and I'm left with 1x. On the right-hand side, I end up with negative 20 over 5. 1x becomes x. Negative 20 over 5 becomes negative 4. Uh-oh. Let's try that again. 3/7 x equals negative 6. I need this to become x equals something. So I'm going to multiply each side by the reciprocal of the coefficient. Remember, the reciprocal is my fraction where the denominator and the numerator switch places. So on the left, my 7's and my 3's cancel. And on the right, I get negative 42 over 3, which would simplify to negative 14 if I divide each of these by 3. The other option would be to cross simplify. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And I end up with negative 2 times 7. Now here's the thing. We're actually going to be working with fractions everywhere. Okay? You do not need to write this part down. Just a few reminders. Your coefficients, you're going to see them as integers, positive, negative numbers, fractions, decimals, but we're going to solve them just like regular equations. We're not going to do anything crazy or fancy necessarily. They can be solved just like normal equations. The only thing is you must follow your rules for multiplying and dividing fractions and decimals. So that's the only thing you need to keep in mind, is that we still need to follow the rules for multiplying and dividing decimals and fractions. So we're going to focus on fractions today. And my text did not come through very well here. So my first example is 2/5 x equals 1/3. Now there are a lot of fractions here, but don't get nervous. Just stay focused and go through our steps. First step is to simplify There's nothing to simplify. Second step, remember our goal is to get x by itself, get x isolated. Next is to undo addition. There is none. Then we undo multiplication. Now remember, with multiplication, I have 2/5 times x. So if I can turn that 2/5 into a 1 times x equals just x. So remember, the goal is to make 2/5 become 1. The only way to make a number become 1 with multiplication is using the reciprocal. So even though I have 1/3 on the right-hand side, I'm still going to complete my process like normal. Nothing different happens because I have a third instead of a whole number. On the left-hand side, my 5s and 2s cancel. On the right-hand side, I just multiply across. Multiply across, multiply across. Did you get it? And I end up with 1x, or x, equals 5/6. Next one. Let's fix this again. It's -5/9x equals 10/15. I don't have anything to simplify, so I remind myself what my main goal is. I need that x to become just 1x. Undo addition, there is none. Undo multiplication. So I need to undo the multiplication by multiplying each side by the reciprocal of that coefficient. My coefficient is -5/9. The reciprocal of a negative is also a negative. So I'm going to multiply both sides by -9/5. And if we look, a negative times a negative makes positive. My 9s and my 5s cancel, and I'm left with positive 1x. On the left-hand side, we can multiply across, or we can simplify. Now, if I multiply across, I'm going to get -90/75, and I'm going to have a lot of simplifying to do to whittle that down. It might be better or faster to simplify before you start multiplying. Here's what I mean. If I look diagonally at my 10 and 5, I can divide a 5 out of both. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5 is 2. If I look diagonally the other way at the 15 and the -9, I can divide out a 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. Then when I multiply across, I get -6/5, which is the same thing I would get with -90/75 if I simplified that down. You do not need to make that a mixed number. You can leave it just like that. Next up, -2/3 equals 5/8x. Now my x is on a different side, but that's okay. Don't get nervous. Nothing to simplify, step 1. Step 2, remember our goal is to get x equals something. Okay. This is a very important step because it helps you focus on what you need to do to get your answer. That means 5/8 has to disappear. Now, some people get confused. Do I make it a 0? Do I make it a 1? Well, think about what would happen if you made it a 0. If 5/8 became 0, I would have 0x. 0x, 0 times anything is 0, isn't it? 0x makes my x disappear. I don't want it to be 0. I want it to be 1. To make 5/8 become 1, I have to multiply by the reciprocal. If I multiply the left side by 8/5, I multiply the right side by 8/5. My 8s and my 5s cancel. And on the left-hand side, I get -16/15, and I'm done. The last thing I want to look at is what happens when we have a mixed number. Okay. 4 1/5 x equals 5/3. So the first thing you need to do, if we look at that simplify step, this would actually fall in that simplify step. I can't find a reciprocal of 4 1/5. Like, if you see mixed numbers, let's make them improper. So that can be found in the simplify step. So we're going to turn this into 21/5 x equals 5/3. Now my goal is to have x equals some number. I have no addition to deal with, so I undo my multiplication using the reciprocal. Multiply both sides by 5/21, so I can cancel out the left side. And on the right-hand side, I multiply across, and I get 25/63. And you're done. And that's it.